what's the point of thinking?
Kanye West. Following Kanye gives you the feeling of watching a train filled with $300 sneakers crash into a guy dressed as Jesus. But at the same time, he projects a certain sincerity that seems to contradict his otherwise impulsive image.
I'm really happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish.
There's no doubt that Kanye thinks Kanye is a philosopher.
I'm Socrates, but my skin more chocolatey.
I don't think we should go quite that far, but Kanye does share at least one concern with 19th century Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard: death. Like a lot of feelings about death. Welcome to this Wisecrack edition on the philosophy of Kanye West and death. Part 1, Death Anxiety. Kanye has never been shy about mentioning death.
We're all gonna die one day.
In his 2005 Grammy Award speech, he spoke about his experience with a car accident and his discovery that
Nothing in life is promised except death.
Kanye has repeated similar sentiments throughout his career.
Only luxury is time. Only thing promised is that you gonna die one day. So we gonna live this to the maximum.
Through the Wire, recorded when Ye's jaw was still wired shut from his 2002 car accident, describes his narrow miss with death and his triumph over the situation at the hands of a guardian angel.
Must got an angel, cause look how death missed his ass.
Frankly, I'm surprised he gave the angel any credit at all. This interest in death is pretty explicit starting from his first album, The College Dropout, where we hear,
When this life is over, I'll fly away.
on one of his most recent tracks, Waves, he keeps it short and simple. Waves don't die. In Power, Kanye fantasizes about a beautiful death.
Now this would be a beautiful death.
And his 30-minute art film Runaway opens with an excerpt from Mozart's Requiem, which is of course a mass for the dead. Okay, so Kanye has some strong feelings about death. So what? Kierkegaard's philosophy tells us that despair over our mortality is pretty inevitable unless we embrace our relationship with the big guy upstairs, the notorious God. Jesus is pretty key to coping with our worries about death because having faith in him means that death isn't actually the end for you. For Kanye, this despair is revealed in his fixation on mortality, his desire to live in the moment, and perhaps his desire to evade death altogether. You know the saying that a man may die, but an idea will live forever? Kanye has bought into that big time. Except the idea that will preserve Kanye is Kanye.
You don't think I would be one of the characters of today's modern Bible?
By positioning himself as a musician, producer, fashion designer, reality star, and frequent commentator on everything and whatever he next pursues,
I have decided in 2020 to run for president.
Kanye is doing more than expressing himself. Maybe he's cultivating a kind of celebrity that is so ubiquitous, he achieves some kind of immortality. Like Kierkegaard's works, Kanye deals with mortality in 3 ways: distracting himself with cool shit, trying to be a good person, and striving to somehow make himself eternal so he doesn't have to worry about all that shit anyway. Or in the words of Kierkegaard, the aesthetic, the ethical, and the religious. Kanye is a walking contradiction, private and radically public, meticulous and spontaneous.
Beyonce had one of the best videos of all time.
So why can't he live the contradiction of embracing his inevitable death and also trying to live forever? Bear with me for a second. Kierkegaard tells us that in order to be cured of the despair that arises from this contradiction, one must understand his or own self and the nature of that self. And to get there, they can progress through 3 consecutive states of existence. Kanye does all 3. Is the similarity to Kierkegaard a total accident born of too much cocaine and a god complex bigger than Kim Kardashian's personality? Possibly, but we're here to figure it out anyway, so let's get to it. Stage 1. Less dying, more parties. The hedonistic spectacle of Kanye is pretty much exactly what Kierkegaard would define as the aesthetic. We can see this in Kierkegaard's 1843 philosophy text, Either Or. Grab a drink, grab a glass, after that I grab yo ass. Kidding, that's definitely Kanye. But Kierkegaard does tell us that the aesthetic man lives his life in pursuit of desire and pleasure, often interpreting himself as if he were always on a stage. Sound familiar? To get a better grasp of Kierkegaard's stages, think about a corn dog. When you're young, corn dogs are really delicious, and that's pretty much all that matters. You don't think about the stomachache you'll have in the morning or your future bowel movements. Corn dog equals yummy. That's all that matters, and that's the aesthetic stage. It's easy to find examples of aesthetic debauchery in Kanye's Kanye's work, although that's not exactly unique among rappers. What's more interesting is the way in which Kanye's aesthetic embodiment is so over-the-top and enduring. As seen most vividly in his music videos, Kanye takes the typical sex and drugs imagery of a hip-hop video and draws out the obscenity, makes it self-aware, and really crafts it into a kind of art. This is the video for Famous off his most recent album, and while it certainly doesn't shy away from controversy, it's also a pretty interesting social and political statement.
I'm motherfucking Kanye West.
For someone who lives on a stage, both metaphorically and also kind of literally, Kanye has a lot to say about his privacy. Kanye has said that one of his biggest concerns with paparazzi is the effect they have on his family, especially his daughter. This is a different side of Kanye than the one we see yelling about being Shakespeare.
I am Shakespeare in the flesh.
But it's certainly not an altogether different character. Far from it. Kanye's sometimes outlandish aesthetic serves as a kind of frame to his familial and ethical considerations. And we know Kanye loves frames. Stage 2. Family, ethics, and politics. Kanye's relationship with his wife and children is one of his most clearly humanizing characteristics.
Family time. Yeah. It's what Kim gave me. Yeah. She gave me everything.
Using one of his many pseudonymous characters, Kierkegaard argues that the transition from the aesthetic stage of self-discovery to the ethical stage is exemplified in marriage. A person in the aesthetic stage is focused only on the momentary pleasures of the erotic, and marriage forces them to commit to something long-term, which changes their priorities. We see evidence of this in Kanye's most recent album, The Life of Pablo, the first he has released since marrying Kim. Pitchfork describes this album as the moment that the artist finally settles down, after years of turbulent affairs and probably one too many pregnancy scares. Let's go back to our corn dog example. At some point, you might discover that corn production requires a tremendous amount of water and has a lot of potential to do economic and environmental damage. Then, even your own personal health concerns might take a backseat to your commitment to something higher than yourself, the welfare of the planet. That's Kierkegaard's ethical stage. Besides his relationship with his family, we see Kanye most actively engaged in the ethical sphere in his advocacy for racial and class justice.
I care about people.
Kanye has been vocal in addressing inequalities since the very beginning of his career.
Everybody in hip-hop discriminates against gay people.
And this hasn't changed as he's gathered more fame and different projects.
George Bush doesn't care about black people.
And he draws much of his musical influences from the soul music of the civil rights era. We also see consistent mentions of racial and class justice in his own lyrics. The message that we hear on Crack Music from 2005 is a similar one to the message in Murder to Excellence in 2011 and New Slaves in 2013. Kanye's work often speaks to the ways in which deeply entrenched power dynamics within our society can perpetuate the oppression of people of color and those from the working class. His commitment to certain moral ideas about justice outside of what just benefits him or his family is the mark of someone operating in the ethical stage of self-discovery, or just, common human decency.
Half the time, 60-70%, I'm not saying popular opinion. I'm saying stuff that I believe.
Stage 3. Praise Jesus. Remember that Kierkegaard says the whole reason to even talk about these stages is because they help you to escape despair. To escape despair, you must accept your true nature, which means realizing that you are bound to Christ, and then you can basically just chill the fuck out. Kierkegaard is 100% on board the Jesus boat, so he's not actually worried about his own death, but he knows you probably are, and he just wants to throw you a big ol' Christian lifesaver. Kanye has one leg in the Jesus boat and one leg in his own boat. On the one hand, he's been consistently vocal about his relationship to the big JC. Remember that one of his first big hits was Jesus Walks, and that theme of religious devotion has stayed in his music even up through his latest album, which samples gospel tracks and opens with the lyrics,
We on our ultralight beam. This is a God dream.
But on the other hand, Kanye is pretty insistent that he is God.
I am a God.
And he doesn't seem to be too concerned about blasphemy. We could really spend an entire day dissecting just this one song. He calls himself a god, he acknowledges his connection to another god, and he is extremely insistent on the timely delivery of his baked goods.
Hurry up with my damn croissants!
That's not the only time Kanye has referred to himself as a god. I mean, the guy named himself Yeezus. In See Me Now, a bonus track off My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, he says he is Lord and refers to his GDs, which Rap Genius tells me means gangsta disciples. He's also spoken about his apparent divinity on stage and in interviews where he gives a somewhat more nuanced approach.
I just told you who I thought I was, a god!
Wow, I really can't argue with that. Alright Kanye, you win, you're a god.
Jesus wept.
Angelic language and imagery appear all over his work. The presence of angels is especially strong in his music videos. No Church in the Wild, Power, and the 30-minute film Runaway all feature winged women. He also just released a trailer for a video game which focuses on his dead mother's ascension to heaven. No, really, that's the thing. The game itself hasn't been released yet, but we're guessing that the player gets to guide Mama West up to the pearly gates, which is basically leaving the fate of his mother's eternal salvation in the hands of gamers. Not sure Kanye thought that one through. Kanye's tense relationship between himself as God and the Christian God might be representative of the despair that he's trying to evade. As previously mentioned, despair is characterized by a tension between a desire for the temporal, the right here on earth, and the eternal. As a god, Kanye hopes to achieve earthly immortality through the legacy of his work, while as a believer in another god, Kanye gives his life over to someone else. For Kierkegaard, religion is the highest stage of existence and self-discovery. It's where you realize that the corn dog actually belongs to someone else. And oh damn, where did this corn dog come from? How did it even end up in my hand? Where am I? Who are you? What are you doing with all these corn dogs? Yeah, now you're the corn dog and you belong to Jesus. In the religious stage, you recognize that reason and belief can only get you so far. Rather than belief, which can be grounded in proof or in reason, you need faith, which is totally beyond the bounds of logic. Kierkegaard describes faith as passionate inwardness, which is also probably a pretty good description for Kanye. That beyond logic part is important, since coming up with rational arguments about death has never made anyone feel more okay about death. When you look at it scientifically, rotting in a hole isn't all that great. I suppose one way to no longer care about death is to believe in your own godliness. The immortality of his work isn't important unless he knows it, so the performance art train wreck that is Kanye West's public persona really just exists as a conversation with himself. But does that surprise you?
I will die for the art, for what I believe in.
Final thoughts. So, Kanye is trying to turn himself into a god at the same time that he believes in the God of Christianity. And he's doing this because he's really confused about death. But how much of his aesthetic, ethical, and religious action is just a matter of him saying whatever pops into his head, and how much of it is intentional? It's impossible to say for sure, but maybe it's worth some thought. He's a lot smarter than people sometimes are willing to give him credit for. Can Kanye really escape his anxieties about death by creating an artistic legacy to leave behind? Forget the sick beats or the VMA antics. Maybe the real reason Kanye has such a massive following is that he gives voice to a certain dread that we all have in common. Or maybe he's just really good at Twitter. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you'd like to hear more Kanye, we've got a bunch of ideas for other episodes, so definitely let us know in the comments. A great way to support the show is by supporting our sponsors. This episode is sponsored by Audible. Audible has an unmatched selection of audiobooks, original audio shows, comedy, news, and much more. Go to audible.com/wisecrack to start a free 30-day trial. And when you sign up, you can pick any book you want, download it for free, and it's yours to keep forever. If you're looking for a recommendation, we really enjoyed Moonwalking with Einstein by Joshua Foer. It's a book that follows one man's journey from an everyday forgetful guy into a competitive memory champion, and it teaches you the art and science of remembering everything. For more about Audible and to start your 30-day free trial with a free audiobook, go to audible.com/wisecrack to sign up. Hey guys, thanks for watching and thanks for all the support. Be sure you subscribe and I'll see you next week. Peace.